What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Game Over podcast. We have my man Troy Carter Jr. to my right and my man JD Tuminski to my left. JD, thanks for joining us today, man.
What up? Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. So give us a little rundown on your history in the music business and the marketing space.
Sure.
And let the viewers know, what your background comes from.
Yeah, I've been in music and entertainment for 15 years now. Been in TV, in music, marketing overall. Started out my career at HBO. I was there for 4 to 5 years before moving over to Columbia Records, where I was in the digital space. And then eventually I was given an opportunity to, start my own team at Def Jam. So I went in Def Jam, was VP of digital marketing and sales, and led a lot of great campaigns. But to bring it back, I actually really got my start in the blog era. So in the 2007s, 2008s, I started a popular music blog. It was called the Hip Hop Update. And back then, I was interviewing and had people on my team interviewing, folks like Kid Cudi and Kendrick Lamar and Asher Roth and, all these folks.
That's dope. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's really how I got my start. I was doing that from my college apartment. And, that's kind of where I made a name for myself. So when I got to New York City after I graduated, I was also simultaneously sort of in the music game. So I was the corporate life at HBO during the day, and then at night I was doing my thing in music. So I was going out to shows. I was photographing concerts. I was doing videography and a whole bunch of different things based on my website at the time. So I came up with the time of fake short drives and nah rights and all sorts of different music blogs back then. So it was an interesting start.
That's really cool, man.
Yeah.
The blog era was really important for music. I felt like it was pre-Spotify.
Yeah.
And it was attached to SoundCloud really and Hype Machine.
Yeah, Hype Machine.
So the blogs were really important because if you got your music onto the blogs, it would then go onto Hype Machine. Certain blogs connected to Hype Machine, which then increased your viewership on Spotify and your plays and all that stuff, which is also how I started as an artist with my group Brass Knuckles back in the day. Like, we would make these remixes and then get them on certain blogs, and they would trend on Hype Machine, and the next thing you know, we were touring. You know? So
Hype Machine was the original, social media, Instagram, TikTok, all that sort of stuff. That's where A&Rs were looking. So to be up there in the top 3 or the top 1 on Hype Machine was a big deal because you had an opportunity to potentially get signed, get your music out there. It was really great. But the blog era, man, that made folks like Wale and Kid Cudi and like I said, Kendrick Lamar was coming up during that time. Currency, all these folks were out and about, and it was just a really good time to be part of music and be in New York City during that time. So, shout out to all those folks then.
Yeah, New York was really, really popping at that point in the music space. So just a little backstory. I met JD from his time at Def Jam. We would do like monthly catch-up calls with Rap Nation, which Game Over runs that YouTube channel. So, every, month or whatever it was, the check-in calls, we would go over all the artists that JD was working on, any new releases coming out, how could we support, and from there, he learned a lot about what we do at Game Over. So Troy and I connected with him when he was at Def Jam, and then that's led to a lot of different activations over the past few years since we started working together.
Yeah.
The first one, I think our biggest play that we put together was the Logic, having Logic on the lab.
Yeah.
Which was one of the dopest episodes we've shot overall. And it was based around his new album. Well, his album at the time, last summer, that came out.
Yeah.
Which there's some funny stories around it, which we can get into. But Yeah, that was a really dope moment for Game Over as a whole, and it was a really cool experience just to work with Def Jam like that.
Yeah, that was a natural fit because, Logic is inherently a gamer. That's how he came up when he was, just starting out. And him and his manager, Justin Fleischer, just, we all collaborated and it made sense. So, props to Logic and his team for following through and coming by. I think we got a lot of great content out of it. And like I said, it was a natural fit. He does this. It wasn't something that was forced. And that's something that, a lot of artists need to, keep in consideration as they're coming up is a lot of these collaborations, a lot of these partnerships and things like that. It's kind of just, the label, whoever trying to fit them into a box where doesn't really make sense. But for someone like Logic who came up in this world, it made a lot of sense. And I think there was a lot of additional content that was made aside from the episode of The Lab, which went everywhere. Good relationship with the folks here, and a really strong collaboration and a major piece of his rollout for Vinyl Days. And I know there's much more to come between Game Over and Logic.
So what role do you think like content and what we do plays into the artist rollout now?
I think it's integral. You need it, and I think you need to do it in a smart way that makes a lot of sense. So whether it's with Game Over or whoever, how are you connecting the dots between music and the different mediums? And I think it can play a central role to a rollout. And not to mention touch different fan bases. So, you have, fan base A over here who's just rap music. You have the casual fans, you have the gamer fans, you have, these people over here. So, figuring out those strategic collaborations and creating original content is something that is thought out every single day when it comes to album rollouts and artist campaigns.
You mentioned a lot of the content that came aside from the lab that day, and you bring up a great point because a lot of those videos with our guys like Blaze and Tommy, like we had a lot of virality come from those short form content pieces that Tommy did an interview with Logic. Logic ended up basically taking his formula and doing interviews, which created even more virality for his pages.
Yeah.
Some of the big hip hop accounts picked it up.
Yeah.
And everything led back to the album, which was really dope.
Yeah.
And then obviously the show aired on TBS,
Yeah.
which created a whole nother impactful experience and moment for Logic and his fans. And then it was obviously very genuine with his early relationship with FaZe Clan, FaZe Blaze being the host. So it really was a perfect scenario and a perfect booking. So kudos to you for helping with that.
Yeah, no, all credit goes to Logic and his team for embracing it and leaning in. Because sometimes you also know, there's artists that come into different scenarios and, shoots and things like that you can tell, like, aren't really into it or don't really want to be there or asking questions of, like, why am I doing this? But it's the artists who really lean in and embrace the scenario that do really well, in my opinion. And the content and everything that comes around it, comes with it, feels more genuine. I think, nowadays the consumer can tell when content or, social clips or videos and things like that are coming from a genuine place versus something that's forced. And that makes for better overall content. But it's that again, like you said, it's that ancillary content. It's that other stuff that we shot around that bigger piece that all led back to the lab and led back to the album to create like a holistic, sort of content marketing plan. So.
Yeah. So JD, you worked at Columbia, obviously, and you got to work with J.Cole during that time.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I came in. J.Cole is one of my favorite artists of all time. He was, part of that blog era coming up, Friday Night Lights, all the mixtapes. I used to see him out and about, him and his team. all throughout New York City. So being able to work with him on an official capacity when I was at Columbia Records was a dream come true. So arguably one of his best albums was 2014 Forest Hills Drive. I worked alongside the entire team internally and with Dreamville and Rock Nation at the time, and it was just a pleasure to be around someone so thoughtful with his music and his message to the people. The way that he wanted to present his album to the people, letting fans hear it first in his childhood home, which was the big marketing activation around that. So essentially, he bought his childhood home in North Carolina, and he held listening sessions for fans to come in and listen to the album first.
Wow.
Which was a really incredible, unheard of marketing plan. Nothing that I've ever heard of like that before. And it was organic too. So I say marketing plan, but it was an organic thing. It felt right. He wanted to touch base with the fans. He wanted to give them an opportunity to listen to the album, and just the entire process of working with their entire team was a pleasure. He's just a very thoughtful person, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate everything he brings to the table as a human being, as well as a musician. So one of my favorite projects to work on, one of my favorite teams, and he's now with over at Interscope doing his thing, and still having success to this day. So wish him and his team all the best.
Another issue we want to address is when we filmed the video, or we filmed the content with Logic, it came out probably a month later. So this was it was like 4 days before it was supposed to air on TBS. And the second portion of the lab features Logic and Blaze in the studio, and he was playing a lot of the unreleased music from Vinyl Days, which we came to find out it's called Vinyl Days for a reason. Every song on the album was sampled. So when it comes to clearance, it was extremely difficult to get this music cleared on television. And Troy and I really had to scramble and find a solution. So Troy, you want to tap in on like some of those points and issues that we had? I know you were just kind of
the solution was essentially we can't use this music on television because it's too much of a headache, but it just goes to show that the label model for like clearing and like the rights that these artists have in the music is outdated, because like Logic and his team, of course they wanted this music exposed to millions of people, but because of the outdated processes we're still dealing with, we had to pull the plug. But it's like no telling which of those million fans would have become like the biggest Logic supporter. So it's just understanding that like artists got to be able to adapt to the new forms of media and how to expose themselves to new audiences, and the labels just kind of got to figure out a way to be more accommodating to that. Because the same thing we run into with getting this music cleared on television is the same issue we would have with Twitch if it came down to it. So something has to change for sure.
For sure. Music artists on the major label system. So JD, coming into 2023, what do you think are the best practices in marketing music for independent artists, for major label artists, for all of the above?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different things you can consider nowadays, but one of the things which is very simple is listening to your fans in 2023 and beyond. So, we live in a society where, some of these artists are so far removed from their own fan bases that they're not listening to what they want. So putting the power back into the fans and listening to what they want out of, a marketing campaign or a music release and things like that. So thinking about that, thinking about new technologies, so thinking about alternative ways to monetize and present the music. So thinking about, what are the digital collectibles that you can release in conjunction with an album release? What are the communities that you can tap into? What are the untapped resources? Are you considering, getting your music in the hands of fitness partners to, be integrated into places like Peloton and things along those lines? So that's another thing to think about. And then coming up with holistic experiences when it comes to your digital content. So not only like the music videos, but what are the lifestyle pieces? What are the making ofs that you can put out there? What are the things like a Hit Boy or a Charlie Puth do, where they put out the making of their music as they're making it in real time. So there's a lot of different creative ways to think about putting your music out into the atmosphere nowadays.
That's super helpful. And then one thing you said, and one thing I always mention to our talent, and Troy does as well, is like listening to the fans, because most of the time they really tell you in the comments.
Yeah.
It's up to the talent to either embrace that or ignore it,
Yeah.
and most talent ignore it, sadly enough. So I think that was a really good point, and a lot of the topics you brought up are super valid.
Yeah, there's so many different alternative means and mediums to get your music out there that aren't traditionally just distributing on Apple Music or Spotify or Amazon or wherever, and things to tap into. So the buzzword nowadays is AI. So what can you do in that space that makes sense for a marketing rollout? I know we saw Lil Yachty just recently put out a great body of work using an AI album cover. But what are the other things that you can do in that space to stand out from the pack? So there's so many different considerations. But coming up with that creative content, tapping into fans, finding alternative mediums, things in the gaming space, obviously, things in the fitness space, as long as it makes sense. There's so many different mediums to tap into nowadays.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that we learn from our campaigns is that when it comes to the influencer marketing side of our campaigns, you don't really need to be in the gaming space. Like, we could create brand awareness for these artists and records in the gaming space, but when it comes to actually participating in our content with our talent, like prime example Logic, it's really important that stays genuine, because we've had the experiences of having artists on our show, in our content, where it just wasn't a fit, and the viewership depicts that.
Yeah.
So that's really a valid point.
Yeah, going back to what I said earlier is that the fans are smart. They can tell when something is genuine versus something that's forced, something that was put on the artist's itinerary when they're visiting LA of like things to do. So fans can see through that, and they know when you're just doing something just to do it versus really invested in the collaboration or however you're trying to present the content or the music or things along those lines.
So in your experience, what are some of the projects you've been a part of that had the most cultural impact?
Yeah, there've been a lot of great projects that I've worked on over the years. I've worked with anybody from Daft Punk to Beyonce to Justin Bieber. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was part of Daft Punk. It was actually one of my first campaigns when I was in the music industry for Daft Punk's Random Access Memories when I was at Columbia Records.
Oh wow, that's a massive album.
Yeah, and I allegedly their last album ever, so pretty historic. So I work with a multitude of different artists, different genres, but there's a few that stick out. One of the ones that I always tend to reference is 2 Chainz' campaign for Rap or Go to the League. So Rap or Go to the League was a great album that came out a couple years ago, and that was just a really fun campaign because it brought together so many different cultural aspects, mainly between music and sports. So there were so many great campaigns that came along with that album. One of the main ones was LeBron James A&Ring the album. So there was an extended Apple Music content series with LeBron and 2 Chainz in the studio that management and my former colleague Marcus Grant helped set up. And it really described a unique way to approach this album. And this album spoke to Black youth in Atlanta, and the options that they're told growing up. So you either rap or go to the league, and 2 Chainz and LeBron spoke to that a little bit, and it made quite an impact. But aside from that, we also did this cool thing called Crate Talk with YouTube. So it's an official YouTube series where 2 Chainz sort of played basketball with this milk crate, which was the central theme of this album. So the milk crate was a basket, essentially. And he played with Mike Dean, Gary Vee, Winnie Harlow, and a couple other folks, and sort of talked through the album process and who they were as people, and it got pretty deep. So that was another cool content series that we collaborated on. And then other, unique forms of collaboration, things with the Bleacher Reports of the world and different sports outlets. So it was a great combination of sports and music, and it was one of the most memorable campaigns that I've personally worked on, and we had great results from that. So that was one.
That's incredible, by the way.
Yeah, it was a really special campaign, and it's one that I think about a lot. So that was great. And then there have been so many other ones. There's one that we did with Vince Staples right when I got to Def Jam for this song called GTO. Get the fuck off. Can I curse?
Yeah.
Called Get the Fuck Off My Dick. So if you just type it in, like Vince Staples and the song title, you'll see all these articles pop up. Basically created like a 2-page, marketing plan of like 30 different marketing things, but we all zoned in on one thing that I had come up with. It was this GoFundMe. So if you type in Vince Staples GoFundMe, there's a lot of great response from that. But essentially, it was an original piece made by Vince Staples where he told people to donate to his GoFundMe, and he would shut the fuck up for the rest of his life. And you just have to like see it. But I guess the point is that you can come up with 30 different ideas, but what's the one right idea? And Paul Rosenberg, the CEO at the time, pushed this one idea out of this document, and management and Vince really loved it, and it was a great catalyst and great rollout for that single back in the day. So it was a really fun one. And then all credit to Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber is a colossal artist, but I give credit to him and his team for his willingness to try new things, get involved with new ways of creating content, and really experimenting. So, he did this, he did this concert with Wave that was a virtual concert where he was performing to millions and millions of people. And he experimented with a lot of things over the pandemic, between all the different live streams and different new tech things. He was, when Clubhouse started popping off, he was on there doing all that. So I give him and his team a lot of credit for stepping up and pushing the boundaries a little bit, because you never know what you're gonna get when it comes to working with a A-tier artist.
Mm-hmm.
Is that person gonna be up here and not really do anything, or is he gonna find ways to touch the people and interact? So
yeah, we've had some experience there on those like bigger activations, not getting too much.
Yeah.
Too much in like
engagement.
Too much effort from the artist.
Yeah.
So obviously, if he's pushing an activation through his socials, you're gonna get a lot better feedback, a lot better viewership, a lot better, fans showing up to these virtual experiences. So it really comes down to how involved the artist wants to be in some of those larger activations.
Yeah, and some of that's also because of the team around that artist. So, that team is probably educating that artist on why it's important to do these things. And that's, the role of the artist team and the label and all the people involved in that project is, let's do this, but this is why you should do it, and this is why it's important to, promote and, be involved with the project. So
yeah, they were big on adapting to social media when it first started popping as well. Like Scooter's got this legendary move. I guess they had a meeting with one potential label suitor like years back, but they tweeted out when Twitter was first popping, like, Justin's here now.
Nice.
Flooded the streets, but obviously, that raises your leverage with any label partner when he tweets and has 1,500 people pull up on site within an hour. But, just them leaning into the new tech as it's coming, whatever the new trends are. It's like whoever adapts to it first tends to rise with the tide.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that new technology and being your willingness to engage is everything nowadays, because there's so many different new trends and new apps and new, you know, pieces of tech that are coming out, you know, on a daily basis. Your willingness to try new things is super important from my standpoint.
Has there been any tech or any apps that have moved the needle, in your opinion, over the last couple years when it comes to, you know, incorporating some of that tech within an artist rollout?
I think, you know, it's not necessarily new, but the thing, you know, all the live streaming functionality across the various platforms, from Twitch to YouTube to Instagram to TikTok, that live streaming capability has changed things for a lot of artists, and it's given opportunities to monetize, make money off of those things, connect with fans, and do interesting things on there, you know, and not just necessarily to do with music, but lifestyle as well. So that's been great. You know, obviously short form video is still popping off right now. It's you know, it's the voice of a generation right now. Whereas, you know, it may have just been TV back in the day. Now it's so many different resources and outlets for short form content.
Yeah, like a couple things to note on the Game Over side. One of our biggest live stream activations was with NLE Choppa.
Nice.
So this was during the pandemic, and we had him stream with FaZe Blaze, and you know, I think during that stream, I think we had 40,000 people follow his, like, he just started Twitch, but there was about 42,000 people that followed him during that stream.
That's huge.
And it was based around his new album and his new release at the time, so it went over really well. And then talking about the short form stuff, a lot of our campaigns right now, we're finding a ton of success on YouTube Shorts and on TikTok. So we've had some really massive campaigns recently with Imagine Dragons. We're doing the Kid Leroy campaign right now, and Lil Uzi, Let It Rock. So a lot of really dope records and dope artists that, you know, we've put together some really exciting campaigns in the gaming space. But yeah, it's been really effective.
Yeah, YouTube is investing a lot of time, money, and energy into shorts right now. There's a real upside to that. I think, you know, some folks approach YouTube and don't think it's as accessible as like a social media platform where you can just post whenever, whatever. People think that there's a higher barrier to entry to posting a video on YouTube, but with shorts, it makes it a little bit more accessible, and it's a gateway for people to start posting more longer form content and develop their own YouTube channels and things along those lines. So anybody who is, you know, hesitant about starting their own YouTube channel or getting involved, maybe start with shorts and get into longer form content. But, you know, going back to what we were talking about earlier is, you know, the Lab episode was incredible. So highly produced, but also that additional ancillary content, those short form pieces, are pieces that can draw casual super fans, anybody into the longer form piece. So it's all interconnected. It's all important.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. Like, those short form clips drove a bunch of viewership back to the long form episodes. So yeah, it was really effective overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't want overproduced out shit anymore.
Yeah.
Like, that's the real thing, is like a marketer, especially, is understanding, like, with Gen Z, Gen Alpha, like you said, like, they know when they're being advertised to, so now they want, like, the opposite. Even from a content standpoint, like, everything doesn't have to be overproduced. Like, it's way more, like, this is more music oriented, but even when you look at, like, somebody like NBA Youngboy, like, what he's able to do from a music video standpoint, shooting what I would say is the same music video over and over again. You know what I'm saying? He's at the crib, on the street, but doing hundreds of millions of views every time he drops. So
he's one artist that does not.
When I'm dealing with an artist, it's like, it's about how engaged your audience is with you. None of the other stuff matters. You know what I mean? Like, Same thing with Claro. She went stupid viral from a laptop webcam.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like,
It's all
It's
consistent.
crazy.
They're all very consistent artists, you know. So that's the other thing.
I agree with you fully. And it's funny because, I've worked with artists who have, crazy budgets for music videos, and they turn in this like masterpiece, and it won't do as well as a developing artist who's doing a street video. And it has a lot to do with authenticity. It has to do a lot with their audience, the engagement, what the artist does with his audience. And it's interesting to see. But Young Boy is a great example. Artist I worked with for a little while, Fredo Bang, is a great example, also out of Louisiana. He's doing these street videos. He's doing things out of his house, and they're generating, millions of views. And it really hits with the audience. So knowing your audience is super important. And it goes back to what we were talking about before, just knowing and connecting with that audience, listen to that audience.
Listen to the fans.
yeah, they gotta discover shit for themselves too. You know what I mean? Like that's the one thing I've realized is like people don't want to be marketed to. Even when you are marketing to them, it's like, how do I create the most organic entry point possible?
Yeah.
And let them go from there, from music to products and like everything in between.
I agree with you. And sometimes you look at an artist's social media and it's so heavily curated, but then you compare it to another artist who may not have the same following, but that artist without the same following may be a little more accessible, may be a little more off the cuff kind of, posting, whatever, selfie, whatever it is. And, that one with the engaged audience who may not be posting as much refined content may have more diehard fans, more people who buy the merch, more people that show up to the concerts, all that stuff, just because they are more accessible and it's not so highly polished.
Yeah.
So I agree with you fully.
That goes back to and what we discuss all the time with my team is the artists that aren't overthinking their content are the ones that are actually getting the most engagement. And all these examples are really great because that's exactly what we've always stressed at Game Over. It's like, don't overthink your content. Just give the fans what they want, So.
Yeah, I agree with that fully. People overthink it, and then, there's been circumstances where, we presented incredible ideas, but the overthinking cripples our marketing plan, because what winds up happening is sometimes an artist just doesn't do anything, which is crazy.
Which we hear about all the time.
Yeah.
Right? So
like, we have, marketing decks and well thought out plans and, things like that. But an artist and his or her team just sits on it because they're paralyzed by, all this information, and they just don't do anything. So it's just, sometimes it's just like taking a photo of yourself or setting up a live stream in the studio as you're screwing around or whatever. But some of the best clips that work in hip hop are artists just sitting in the studio, hitting play on their music and just like vibing out to it.
yeah, fans just want to see a glimpse of the behind the scenes stuff, So giving them access is really what they want.
Yeah. And just keeping it real with that access too. So
dope. Well, man, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, I appreciate
that. Was
having
super
me.
Insightful.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people can take a lot of great information from your experiences and our experiences. So thanks again for coming.
Yeah, for sure. Hope some folks out there enjoy it, and hopefully I can be back here soon and talk some more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.